Well, good morning, everybody, on this lovely Monday morning. Great to see you. Hope you had a lovely weekend. We had a great weekend in church. Fantastic flower festival. Really enjoyed it. Regular congregations on Sunday. All really good and had a really good weekend. Anyway, hope you had a lovely weekend too. Busy week for us this week coming up. Tomorrow, we're getting a brand new heating system, starting to install that. And we're also getting a new choir vestry window this week. All happening this week. Lots going on. Anyway, God be with you, and please ask for your prayers, and I hope you have a great week. My friends, we are, as you know, in Mark's Gospel. We're now in chapter 7, nearly halfway through. And what happened on Friday was Jesus had a discussion with the Pharisees who criticised him because his disciples weren't eating with the hands washed properly and all that sort of stuff. Whole subject about uncleanness and stuff, and it picks up on a bit on that vein this morning. So here goes. We're in Mark's Gospel, chapter 7, and I'm starting to read now at verse 14. Then Jesus called the crowd again and said to him, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There's nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile." When he'd left the crowd and entered the house, his Pharisees asked him about the parable. He said to them, "Then do you also fail to understand? Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile, since it enters not the heart but the stomach, and what goes out into the sewer?" Thus he declared all foods clean. And he said, "It is what comes out of a person that defiles, for it's from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these things come from within, and they defile a person." From there he set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and didn't want anyone to know he was there. He could not escape notice, but a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, but it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home, found the child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Right, picking up Jesus on this whole theme of uncleanness. What was unclean and what wasn't? What made you unclean and what didn't? And what Jesus is essentially saying here is, for most people thought at the time, you were made unclean by something from outside. So by touching something or by touching someone or going near something or whatever it would be, that was what made you unclean. So therefore, being clean was about separating yourself from the world, about separating yourself from unclean. So you couldn't touch this, you couldn't eat that, and so on. So it was all about separating, and separating yourself from certain things and from certain people. And what Jesus is effectively saying here is, it's actually that's not the way it is. Christianity is, along lots of ways, a heart thing. It's all about loving God. And he says, it's not what make from outside that makes us unclean. The unclean stuff actually comes from inside. What's inside our heart is far more dangerous than anything can touch us. So I think what he's saying here is, for us, Christian faith is not about separating ourselves from the world, because actually the world can be as unclean as it likes, but we can still be clean through it. So it's not about separating yourself from the world. And some people kind of think it is. It's about, become separate from this and not touching. I know. But actually, I don't think it is. I actually think Christianity is all about being involved in the world, because it's not what goes into us that makes us unclean, but what's come from inside. And therefore, we can be with whoever we like, and we can talk to whoever we like, without actually necessarily bringing us down. So I think that's something very important Jesus is saying here is life in the Christian life is not about separating yourself from the world, but actually it's about being involved in the world. It's about being pure on the inside, not just from the outside. And without, in a sense, to illustrate that point, what happens now is he goes and talks to this called Syrophoenician woman. So the hardest thing about Syrophoenician is spelling it. Basically it means Lebanon. That's kind of where that comes from. And I think almost to illustrate what Jesus has been saying here, Jesus talks to this Syrophoenician woman. Lots of people who were Jewish at the time wouldn't have had anything to do with such a person. they've been bad neighbours for many, many years. And in lots of ways, perhaps lots of people of his type wouldn't have been talking to her. But actually, nobody is outside the love of God. And Jesus is prepared to talk to anybody, because nothing from outside makes him unclean, He can discuss with whoever he wants. Just because the world's go rotten doesn't mean we have to go rotten until we can still remain pure. And because of that, as I said, faith is not about separating ourselves from the world, but about being immersed in it. And actually here he is. Jesus is prepared to talk to the Syrophoenician woman, and he has an engagement with her. So that's the second. So the first thing is about, we're not unclean by what comes from outside, but we're unclean by what comes from inside. That's the first thing. Secondly, to illustrate the point, Jesus is prepared to talk to this person, showing that nobody and nothing is beyond the reach of God's love. That it's, as I say, it's not about being separate, it's about being with people and about showing people God's love. But the third thing I think I want to say really is something remarkable about this woman. Maybe out of faith, maybe out of desperation because she's out of her wits worried about her daughter, or maybe a combination of both of the above. But she approaches Jesus because her daughter's got this unclean spirit and she's basically worried sick about her. And what can Jesus do? And Jesus' response is actually quite interesting when he says, it's not right to give the children's food to the dogs, meaning, it's not right to give food that should be for God's people to any other people. And it sounds a bit harsh, especially when you use the word dog. Dog, you normally think, is not a very nice phrase, not a very nice word to use, because our canine friends often don't get a very good rap in the Bible. Except, of course, until you realise that there were actually two Greek words that came out as dog. One is the canine vermin type, but the other kind is the one for fluffy little puppies, and that's the one that's being used here. So when he says it's not right to give the children food to the dogs, he doesn't mean the vermin dogs, he's talking about cuddly little puppies, and in a sense that softens it rather. But why does he say it? Is Jesus being mean? I don't think so. I think in a sense, we keep saying God does not work round us, God works with us and through us. And I think he wanted to see what this woman would do. I think he wanted to see how strong her faith was. And her response is remarkable, because she says, it is right to give the spare food to the dog, and her response is remarkable. And, because I think the question is, was she just going to fold? Was she going to give up? And the answer is no, she wasn't. Even though Jesus made it a little bit awkward for her, she wasn't going to let go. She believed in Jesus so much. She cared about her daughter so much. She was not going to let go. And actually, and because of that, her daughter was healed. And again, I think there's a remarkable example to us here. There are so many great men and women in the Bible, often very flawed characters, but they had very good faith. They actually went on with it and they never gave up. There's a great story by a guy called Jacob in the Old Testament. And I think Jacob wasn't a very nice person. For some reason, God liked him. And there's a lovely story about him wrestling with God overnight. And his words to God were, I won't let go until you bless me. And I think so many of us on our faith, we give up on our prayers, or we can give up on our faith, we can give up trust. But actually, this woman was not going to let go. And because she had stickability and persistence, because she kept on going, she kept on believing, she wasn't going to let go. And I think because of that, her daughter was healed. And her faith was what healed her daughter. So 3 things briefly from this reading this morning. Firstly, it's not what comes from outside that defiles us, it's what comes from inside, and actually, which means we don't have to live life separate from everything else. It means we can, because we don't have to let the world put us to our standards because we've got God in us. And because of that, we can live life to the full without having to separate from everything and everyone. Because it's what's unclean comes from inside, not from outside. Secondly, to illustrate the point, Jesus goes and has a conversation with the Syrophoenician woman. Lots of people of his particular variety wouldn't have done at the time. But to show that no one and nothing, and no one is beyond God's love, he is prepared to engage with the Syrophoenician woman. But thirdly, I think what Jesus was teasing out in this interesting conversation is about her faith. And because she had stickability, because she kept on going, because she kept on believing, she kept on trusting, in the end, Jesus healed her daughter. And I pray, my friends, that God will give you and I a faith like hers that doesn't let go, that keeps on going, that keeps pressing on, that keeps praying, keeps believing, and keeps going for it. Hope that makes sense. More tomorrow. God bless you. Have a lovely day. And don't forget to share this message with your friends. Have a lovely day.